This is a response for Coughlan because your video, I don't remember which channel it was, so there'll be a link in the description, but you talk about the legacy of Kurt Cobain, and I don't know how it is in England, but in America, essentially, if you go into somewhere like a mall, you are probably more likely to encounter a picture of Kurt Cobain or some image of Kurt Cobain or Nirvana than you are to see a reference to Jesus or Christianity. And America is a very celebrity worshipping country. Marilyn Monroe is probably, similar situation with the Virgin Mary. You're, depending on where you are, in what context in America, you're probably more likely to see some image of a celebrity than you are to see some religious icon. And I find it interesting with Kurt Cobain. I'm personally tired of the whole Nirvana hype, but at the same time, I think that it is obligatory for American teenagers to all go through oh my god, Nirvana is the greatest band ever. And it reminded me of two things that the author Chuck Klosterman talked about in, I can't remember for certain which one of his books, one of the paraphrases was from, but he said that every teenager would go through a Led Zeppelin phase where they thought Led Zeppelin was the greatest band ever, and I think that might have been replaced from his generation. It might have been Led Zeppelin, and now it's Kurt Cobain. But with another thing that the author Chuck Klosterman pointed out in, I believe it was Killing Ourselves to Live, in which he was on an assignment from Spin magazine and he went around the country visiting all these places where rock stars died, and he talked about Cobain and how it's doubtful whether or not he actually lived under a bridge like he claimed, or whether it was for that long. And he mentioned the fact that when Kurt Cobain killed himself, prior to that, Nirvana was already starting to fade in terms of popularity. A lot of people did not like In Utero. The band tried to go for a more underground sound to stifle all the, the praise they got for Nevermind, and then, too many undesirables started liking Nirvana for their taste, and so they wanted to go for a more, indie rock sound with In Utero, and so, of course, the general public didn't like it as much as their previous albums, and Pearl Jam had become more popular, and then Cobain killed himself, and suddenly everything was about Nirvana. And there really is a almost Jesus-like obsession with Kurt Cobain that I find, I want to say American, but I don't know. In England, is the myth of Kurt Cobain everywhere as well? Because essentially the way I look at it is from a pretty cynical point of view, like from the trust fund of Francis Bean and the bank account of Courtney Love comes yet another Nirvana box set that you don't need, including only one new track that you probably could have got somewhere else, and repackaged versions of all their old songs that you have on the albums already. So much money is being made off of this guy, and I do think that he would probably be disgusted by all of it. But at the same time, yeah, he was a coward and a junkie and made a poor choice, and that's also why it's so, I don't necessarily say dangerous, but not necessarily a positive thing that everybody, worships this guy and looks up to him as this idol. And certainly, I like Nirvana, I like the music. I remember as a teenager reading Come As You Are. But there are other more interesting artists that didn't resort to what Kurt Cobain did. And as you said, he signed a record deal. And according to Nirvana legend, they thought, of taking the money and then dissolving the band and just splitting with the money. Although I don't know how well that would have really worked, because they probably just would have been sued for all the money back. But, yeah, Interscope Records, what exactly were they expecting? But I really think that Nirvana wouldn't be as remembered as they were if they were this lone entity. They may have started the explosion of grunge and may have sent every record scout, every band scout in the country on the next plane to Seattle. But you look at Pandora and stuff like that, if you type in Nirvana and then go to the suggested other songs, it will suddenly start playing things like Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains, because what we think of as this random computer algorithm that's supposed to know your tastes, it's just a basic knowledge of music history. Oh, they like Nirvana, I bet they'd like Alice in Chains too, and here's some Pearl Jam, and all bands originating circa early 90s Pacific Northwest. This is the Nirvana channel. There were a lot of other bands that came out of that era that got as famous as Nirvana, but it reminds me more of the Jesus legend, where there's so many Christian apologists, Josh McDowell and William Lane Craig write entire books on the resurrection of Jesus as historical fact, and how could Christianity have continued even though Jesus died, and clearly Kurt Cobain proved that death is no career ender. In fact, it does wonders for your career. And Marilyn Manson, his whole album Hollywood is essentially about celebrity worship and the parallels between American society and martyrdom and Christianity. And Marilyn Manson's autobiography is a way more interesting read, in my opinion, than the 30,000 books that have all been written on Kurt Cobain. I mean, because that's really what mythologizing someone is. I don't know of any band that has more biographies than Nirvana. I can just think of like 8 different ones off the top of my head. At the same time, what exactly is worth all of this attention? There's lots of great music out there, but because they put him on t-shirts and make him out to be this icon, and he killed himself, and look, here's a picture of Kurt standing in front of this angel thing that makes Kurt look like he had wings. And I understand it because I was a teenager in America once, but at the same time, it's all kind of part of the hype story. I almost feel like watching this. So many atheists have come out on YouTube telling their deconversion from Christianity, and it's like, let me tell you my deconversion from Kurt Cobainism. But no, I wouldn't say that, take it to that extreme, but there are some people who are right up there, it seems, and that seems to be a big phase. But is that true in England? Do English teenagers go through, oh my god, Kurt Cobain was the greatest musician who ever lived, and it's such a tragedy that he died? Or is there a different cultural attitude on your side of the pond?